Hey, what in the hell happened to you? Where you been? What the fuck? Huh? Hi. Hey, it's Nick, Digilio. How are you? Hey, it is my YouTube channel. Thank you for checking it out. New videos almost daily, every other day or so. And Patreon people, thank you so much for being a patron. It helps out a lot. 3, 6, 9, 25 bucks a month, whatever you want to give. Helps keep the content coming, helps me going. Patreon.com/NickDShow. Give today, become a patron, get some bonus materials and all kinds of cool videos and other cool behind-the-scenes stuff. So, become a patron today, patreon.com/NickDShow. My podcast is the Nick D Podcast, as part of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. New episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Please subscribe today. Okay, the other day marked the 40th anniversary of the first episode of Police Squad airing on ABC. My opinion, funniest television show in the history of TV. So I thought I'd go back and look at some of my favorite sitcoms and some of the funniest shows ever. Now, Police Squad is a show that had no business. I mean, I'm the biggest fan ever of Police Squad, and I'll explain to you, what it is and why it's so great in a second. But I don't think even the hardcore fans of Police Squad ever expected it to be a show that would be, a huge crossover success, and do multiple seasons. It just didn't seem like that would happen. And some of us kind of like that. Kind of like the fact there are only 6 episodes of Police Squad out there. But when I look back at it, I couldn't believe it. First of all, I couldn't believe it was 40 years, and it makes me feel really, really fucking old that Police Squad is 40 years old. Unbelievable. But anyway, it made me go back and look, and I wanted to talk about some of my favorite sitcoms. So what I'm going to do is just make it American sitcoms because, to do some of the sitcoms from other countries, I'd be here all day, especially to talk about British comedies, because the British sitcoms and the British half-hour shows would require a whole separate 5-hour video. And, of course, led by Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Monty Python's Flying Circus. And, of course, Fawlty Towers, which could conceivably... Fawlty Towers, because I don't consider Flying Circus a sitcom. It's one of the funniest things that's ever been created by Earthlings, ever. And made a massive impact on me and an influence on my comedic thoughts and process and taste. But it's not a sitcom. Monty Python's Flying Circus is not a sitcom. Fawlty Towers is a sitcom. Absolutely a sitcom. And for my money, maybe the greatest sitcom of all time. But I'm not including British or foreign sitcoms. I'm just talking about American sitcoms. And weirdly, Police Squad does fall under that blanket. It's a half an hour long. It was on, network television, popular television. And it fit that format, without commercials, 22 to 23 minutes long, half an hour. Did not have a laugh track, but not all sitcoms have laugh tracks. But although I think even the Zuckers and the Abramses would agree that it's not really a sitcom, but it fell into that category. So I thought I would talk about the best American sitcoms, my favorite American sitcoms, because I think Police Squad's the funniest show ever. Brilliant, way ahead of its time. It was... the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrams' follow-up to Airplane. After Airplane was a massive success in 1980, they went to ABC with this idea to do a satire of police shows. M Squad in particular, and other, all of the sort of, cop shows and the cliches and all the stupid things that cop shows did over the years, and to just take it on. And they hired Leslie Nielsen, who, of course, was... in Airplane, and they got the same writers, and they hired a bunch of different writers and some directors, including Joe Dante, who directed 2 episodes of it, the great Joe Dante. And they put together every joke that you could possibly imagine. Now, you've seen Airplane, you've seen Top Secret, and the show bombed. Police Squad bombed when it came on. One, because, back in 1982 when the show came on, it was unusual because most sitcoms at that time were filmed before a studio audience, and if they weren't taped before a studio audience, there was canned laughter. There was a laugh track in there to tell you when to laugh. Even fucking MASH had a laugh track. and you knew where to laugh, and it was all set up. Like something happened at the beginning of the episode, and it was all completely worked out. Any kind of complications were fixed, and everything was fine in 22 minutes later. You would get your laugh here and there. You'd have your wacky characters. You've had your catchphrases. You would do the stupid shit that sitcoms would do, especially in the 80s, over and over again. And along comes this very cerebral, very weird satire of cop shows, and in particular a show that not a lot of people saw. And it was filled with sight gags that you had to look for in the frame, and weird wordplay, and jokes that were sometimes as stupid and corny as you can possibly get, and then as unbelievably brilliant and intellectual as you can imagine, all mixed in together into this weird collaboration of all kinds of types of comedy, sight gags, verbal, games, all kinds of shit, all thrown in a half an hour at rapid fire with no laugh track. And again, like I said, every frame of an episode of Police Squad was loaded with visual jokes that you would have to look for in the background. I mean, I've seen every episode. There were only 6 episodes of Police. I've seen every one of them a million times, and I always look in the back and even find more ridiculous shit. Jokes. There were jokes crammed in every single frame of every single moment of Police Squad, and it just went over the head of 90% of the people that watched it. People didn't fucking get it. They had no idea what it was. Even fans of Airplane were like, what the fuck is this? Because it's weirder than Airplane. And they would get even weirder when they made Top Secret. 2 years later, they would make Top Secret, which I still think is the best movie that the Zuckers and Abrams ever made. It's fucking brilliant, it's hilarious, and it's certifiably batshit crazy, which is why Top Secret is one of the greatest comedies of all time. It took a lot of risks, it made no sense, it was weird. And then eventually, the bombing of Police Squad was redeemed because they made movies out of it. They did The Naked Gun in 1988. Which became a huge hit, and then there were sequels, and it became a franchise, and then people went back and watched Police Squad. They aired it on MTV a few times. People discovered it, and finally were like, oh, wow, this is really brilliant. It was way, 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 way fucking ahead of its time, which is why most people didn't get it. And the movies aren't as good, I'll tell you what. The Naked Gun movies, especially the first one's great. Second one's pretty good. Third one, they got worse as they went along. But even the first Naked Gun movie is not nearly as funny as any of the 6 episodes of Police Squad. Police Squad was ballsier, it was weirder, it was riskier. They made the movies more slapsticky. They made them easier to digest because I think they were a little bit nervous that they went too far with Police Squad, and certainly went too far with Top Secret, which was not a big hit. People didn't know what the fuck to make of that movie, and I still think it's the most genius thing that the Abrams and Zuckers have ever done. But I think they wanted to play it a little bit safe. They did a lot of the great stuff that you would find in episodes of Police Squad, but the movies were much more fan-friendly. They were much more audience-friendly, more slapsticky. There was a lot more wacky shit in it that was not at all in Police Squad, which was played straight-faced. And that was one of the problems with the movies. Like in the movie, at one point, Leslie Nielsen is having a fight with Priscilla Presley, and she goes to slap him, and he grabs her hand, and then she goes to slap him with her other hand, and he grabs her other hand, so now he's got hold of both of her hands, but a third hand comes out and slaps him across the face. Now, in order for that joke to work in the way that it should, he shouldn't acknowledge that. Leslie Nielsen's character should not acknowledge it. That third hand, suddenly, that Priscilla Presley has, slaps him across the face. And in the movie, he goes, like, where did that hand come from? Isn't that weird that she has a third hand that can slap me? Uh-oh. And he mugged and acknowledged the fact that it was insane and weird that a third hand came out and slapped him. That's not how you pull that joke off. When the third hand came out and slapped him, straight face, go right to your next line. That's how you handle it. That's how they would have handled it in Top Secret, and that's how they would have handled it in Police Squad. But because they alienated a lot of people, and a lot of people just didn't get it and didn't want to work for the joke, because it requires you to work for the joke, because it's intellectual comedy, so they just, boom, third hand comes out, slaps Leslie Nielsen, he goes, huh, what, where did that third hand come from? And they did a lot of that shit in the Police Squad movies. They started to make them even more slapstickish and goofy and acknowledge the weirdness. Don't acknowledge the weirdness that's happening in this universe. Don't acknowledge it. Don't acknowledge it. They didn't acknowledge it in Airplane. They didn't acknowledge it in Top Secret. They certainly didn't in Police Squad, but they did in the Naked Gun movies, and that's why they're not as good. It's an entire different universe. So, it also failed because the geniuses at ABC decided that they would put it up against Hill Street Blues. Now, in 1982, Hill Street Blues was the biggest show on television. It was, groundbreaking in terms of cop drama, and everybody was watching it. It was Emmy nominated. Oh, God, people just fucking loved Hill Street Blues. Terrific show, yes, but I mean, it was the show of the moment, and it was like critical acclaim and blah, blah, blah. Nothing like this has ever been done. It's changed the face of television. So, of course, put this weird, comedy up against that juggernaut on NBC, and you're going to fail. And it failed miserably. In the show, only 4 episodes ever aired. 6 were done, and that's it. And all 6 of the episodes are brilliant, and they're hilarious. So, Police Squad, 40th anniversary. I'm old. It's brilliant. There you go. All right, here are some of my favorite sitcoms that I think are brilliant. Arrested Development. Another show that had a cult following, a small cult following. Another show that required you to have fucking brains when you watched it. As opposed to a lot of, like the majority of sitcoms required you to sit there and go, and watch this, like that fucking Urkel show. Did I do that? And all that shit. That's your typical bullshit, Full House, all that garbage. All those stupid-ass sitcoms. Something like Arrested Development comes along. Again, no shot on film, no laugh track. Filled with very weird characters doing very weird things. It was brilliant, and it snuck under the radar, and then, of course, Fox canceled it. When it came back to Netflix, it wasn't good. I will say that. It was very disappointing. But Arrested Development, a brilliant sitcom. Community. One of the great sitcoms to represent an ensemble. I think Community is one of the best ensembles in the history of sitcoms. Everybody in that show was great. Every character was memorable. Everybody had what they were supposed to do in terms of what their characters were, how they drove each plot, how and the chemistry between that entire cast, including Dickhead Chevy Chase, was great. Everybody on that show, and of course everybody has gone on to do incredible things. Joel McHale has become, I think, in real life, a massive prick. I can't stand Joel McHale anymore. I loved him on Community. But Community, another one of those shows that came out of that time when sitcoms were really changing. Influenced, if you go back, a lot of the sitcoms that I'm going to mention from the 2000s, the mid-2000s and stuff, you can trace it all the way back to how ballsy Police Squad was. How way, way, way ahead of its time it was 40 years ago. Nobody was doing that kind of stuff. In the mid-2000s, when shows like Scrubs, which I mentioned here, Scrubs and like 30 Rock, were doing weird cutaways and strange jokes and visual jokes, shot on film, no laugh track. Community did the same thing. They would do these weird asides and fantasy sequences. Scrubs was one of the first ones to really do that. Scrubs is a great show. Scrubs was a great, great show. Very, very funny. And, again, a great ensemble. Zach Braff, Donald Faison, Neil Flynn, John McGinley. Everybody on that show was great, and it did weird stuff. It would cut away to different, asides and fantasy scenes, and they would whip pan. That kind of stuff, they weren't doing that kind of stuff regularly. Now it's all over the place. Every sitcom does it. Every sitcom that you can imagine does that. But Scrubs is one of the very first to do it, and Scrubs completely took that from Police Squad. We're going back to classics as well. All in the Family. It goes without saying, one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. Groundbreaking, landmark, great, fantastic, and still to this day holds up. That's another key. Does it still hold up? All in the Family still holds up. Some of it is a little dated, early 70s, taking on certain issues, but those issues are still prevalent today, more than ever, actually. And watching an episode of All in the Family is not only hilarious, but it still matters. Sanford and Son, personally, one of my favorite shows of all time. Red Fox was one of the funniest human beings ever. During the first, 3.5 seasons of Sanford and Son, there wasn't a funnier show on TV. And that first 3.5, 4 seasons of Sanford and Son, you can go back and watch any episode from any of that time period, and it stacks up against some of the best comedy that you'll ever see. Great cast, led by the brilliant Red Fox, Sanford and Son. The Good Place. Now, here's another show that I think historically is going to go down as one of the greatest, most groundbreaking, most risk-taking shows of all time. The Good Place, with Kristen Bell, Ted Danson, led another amazing cast, but a show that was filled with so much fucking imagination that you never knew what was going to happen next. It had a really cool premise, and they took off from that premise into even more original and more audacious ideas. And not only was it funny and in every kind of level, and not only was it creative and ingenious in the way it was set up and executed, but it was really, really emotional. Like, it really snuck up on you. The Good Place is a very, very emotionally rich show. Like, it was moving, it was sad, it was funny, it was joy-filled, it was fucking weird. It was all of those things. The Good Place is one of the most creative, imaginative, and most brilliant sitcoms in the history of television. I think I'm happy that it ended when it ended, because it was a very satisfying emotionally and intellectually ending to that show. But I do miss it, and I think The Good Place is one of the greatest shows ever. Broad City. These two broads, please. Two of the funniest women that have ever lived. Really, really influential. Yes, it was pot comedy, but it was a show that showcased women in their 20s in New York at the time, and it was beautiful to watch. It lasted, I think, 5 seasons. It was 5 or 6 seasons, and it was really great to just watch these two brilliant writers and actresses and comedians grow up before your eyes, because the show matured, the show got different, and again, really, weird cutaways and weird things. And it was obviously, it was meant to be. I guess you blow a little weed when you watch it, I guess. I don't know. I never was high when I watched it. But I love Broad City, one of my favorite shows of all time. Here's one of the legendary shows of all time, South Park. South Park is a show that's been on forever, 25 years now. It's celebrating 25 years. And it's one of the most consistently brilliant shows that's ever been on television. Trey Parker, Matt Stone, Matt Stone, in my opinion, luckiest man that's ever lived. Almost every single episode of South Park is written and directed by Trey Parker solo. Matt Stone is coattail boy, as far as I'm concerned. He's kind of funny, he can write things here or there, and he does some fun voices. But fuck him. Trey Parker is the real genius behind South Park. Trey Parker is the real voice behind South Park. And South Park is consistently the most important and the most brilliant sitcom of the last 25 years. It is one of those deals where if something happens in the world, I want to see what Trey Parker's going to do about it. I want to see what he's going to write about it. Anything that happens, any kind of war or conflict, any kind of political thing, Trump becoming president, COVID, their COVID specials have been spectacular. South Park, consistently brilliant. It was great at the beginning, and it only gets better. It's one of the few shows, if any, that's been on for 25 years, and it's not only consistent every year, but it's actually gotten fucking better, and more important, it's appointment television. It is appointment television. It is brilliant. It is, to me, it's where satire lies right now, in this day and age. And for the past 20 years, if you want brilliant, ballsy, risky, I don't give a fuck what the rules are satire, you go to Trey Parker and you watch South Park, one of the most important television shows ever. And the movie, Bigger, Longer, Uncut, is one of the greatest movie musicals of all time. So South Park. Larry Sanders Show, way ahead of its time. Now everybody's doing that kind of humor. Again, no laugh track. Behind the scenes look at what it was like to do a late night show. The late, great Gary Shandling, Rip Torn, everybody involved. Judd Apatow got his career started on there. It was brilliant. It was ahead of its time, and it still holds up. Again, a show that you look at now and you go, oh, that's where so many ideas for shows today came from. Go back and watch Larry Sanders and then go, ooh, wow, this show wouldn't exist without Larry Sanders, and that show wouldn't exist without Larry Sanders. It's that important. The Bob Newhart Show, one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. Bob Newhart, brilliant. Everybody on it, brilliant. Suzanne Plachette, drool. My God. It was groundbreaking in that nobody had ever done a psychologist before on television or ever explored that world before and done it beautifully. It's another show that was great. It was part of that Murder's Row lineup on Saturday night on CBS, where in one night they had All in the Family, MASH, Mary Tyler Moore, Bob Newhart, Carol Burnett, all in one night, every Saturday night. Watched it every Saturday. That lineup is insane. But Bob Newhart, great. Cheers, one of the greatest sitcoms of all time. Perhaps, here's the thing. You go back and watch, just go back, and I know it's out there, it's streaming, it's on the Netflix or one of those fucking streaming services. Go back and watch the pilot for Cheers. Do yourself a favor, go back and watch the very first episode, the pilot for Cheers. It's perfect. It's the greatest pilot in the history of television. It is truly the greatest first episode / pilot of any TV series ever. in the history of television. It sets up the place, the time, it sets up the characters and the conflict and what will happen for the rest of that series. It sets it all up brilliantly, establishes the characters. It's fucking hilarious. It's smart. It's well-paced. It is the best pilot in the history of television. And Cheers went on to be great. Frasier, obviously, you know, the spinoff from Cheers, just as good as Cheers. I think Frasier was on a little bit too long, a couple of years too long. And it got kind of goofy towards the end. But Frasier, Cheers, fantastic. Taxi, in that same vein, a brilliant show with another ensemble cast. And Cheers, Frasier, Taxi, they fit into the actual real sitcom world because they were taped before a live studio audience, and it was set up joke, and there were no cutaways or stuff like Scrubs would do and things like that. Straight up sitcom, and as a straight up sitcom, Cheers, Frasier, Taxi, those are as good as you can get. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. My ex-wife hated that show so much. She would come in the room while I was watching it, watch about 4 minutes of it, and go, I don't know how you can watch this show. These fucking people are the most despicable characters ever. And yes, they are. And the show is genius. Another show, filmed, weird sight gags, no laugh track. And seriously, maybe the 4 most despicable characters ever in the history of television. I don't know, 5 most despicable characters ever in the history of television. But yeah, it's Always Sunny. Still on, still great. The episodes that they did in Ireland this season were phenomenal. Again, characters, disgusting. Show, hilarious. Dick Van Dyke Show, absolutely classic. Again, another groundbreaker. Behind-the-scenes comedy writing. Nobody had ever really done that before. Carl Reiner was the genius behind that show. And to hire everybody who was in it and have Dick Van Dyke your star, great. Dick Van Dyke Show. Mary Tyler Moore I mentioned earlier. What can you say about that? Groundbreaking in terms of the writing, in terms of the cast, and especially from a woman's point of view, especially at that time in the 70s. It really embraced what was really important to what was happening with women's issues in the 70s, and was also hilarious. Parks and Recreation and The Office. Now, they're kind of partnered up here, because The Office, which was a spin-off of the British version, which Ricky Gervais, which I still think is better, I was really not, I was not looking forward to it, and I did not like the first episode of The Office, first few episodes of The Office, especially the first one, because it was just a retread of the first episode of the British version. But eventually, obviously, The Office became one of the funniest and best shows ever. Again, with the whole mockumentary setup and style that Ricky Gervais established, they were able to do a lot of weird things with the camera and cutaways and things like that. Very creative, very funny. Again, that cast all of them would go on to do better things and more interesting things and have great careers. Each one of them, you can look at each one of the cast members and just go, wow, remember when they were all in one show? Yeah, The Office. Parks and Rec, another show that started out a little shaky. Parks and Rec started out uneasy. It was like an Office ripoff. Had the mockumentary shaky camera thing. Had, it took place like in a workplace kind of office thing. Had your archetype characters, but after like like into the second season, about halfway through the second season, not only did Parks and Rec become a great show, it became better than The Office. Parks and Recreation is a great show. It's one of the best shows. Personally, one of my favorite shows ever, with some of the most memorable characters and an incredible, ensemble cast. But I think it did become better than The Office. I think it started out as a pale, rip-off of The Office, and then it became better than The Office. I think Parks and Rec, overall, when you look at The Office and Parks and Rec, I think Parks and Rec's a better show. And then, of course, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, same guys, who would do this show, same sort of style. Brooklyn Nine-Nine, cast led by Andy Samberg, a great show, hilarious show. Michael Schur, all those guys who were responsible for that bunch of shows, great stuff. 30 Rock falls into that category too. Tina Fey broke a lot of ground with it. 30 Rock came right on the heels of Scrubs. Scrubs, I think, was the first one to do that weird filming aside kind of thing. And 30 Rock did it as well. 30 Rock was influenced by Scrubs. There's no question about it. 30 Rock took a lot from Scrubs, and I don't know if Tina Fey would admit that, but it's true. She took a lot of stuff from Scrubs and made it her own. And 30 Rock is great. And all the years it was on, spectacular cast. Everybody on that show was great. Brilliant writing. A great team of directors. 30 Rock, one of the best shows, one of the funniest shows of all time. Veep. The great Julia Louis-Dreyfus Veep is one of the greatest shows of all time. The shows on HBO are not as it's not as fair to have those on like Larry Sanders and obviously Curb Your Enthusiasm because they don't play by the same rules as network TV. Although network TV now, like Sunny and everybody, you can do whatever the hell you want on those shows and say fuck and all that stuff. But, Veep is brilliant, brilliant satire, led by she's a gift from God, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. So Veep is in there. News Radio, personally one of my favorite shows of all time. Not the most accurate in terms of like portraying the radio world. I was in the radio world for many, many years, and hopefully we'll get back into the radio world again. I'm in the podcast world right now, which is awesome because you make your own rules and you can go, hey, fuck you if you want to. So I'm in the podcast world right now, which I am loving. But News Radio, again, great cast, the late, great Phil Hartman. I mean, everybody, Dave Foley, Stephen Root, just an incredible show. One of my favorite shows, News Radio. If you're going to go back to the original, The Honeymooners, maybe my favorite TV show of all time. I love it. The classic 39 episodes, not one of them is a stinker. I know every single line, every single beat, every single moment in every single episode of the original Honeymooners episodes. I still watch them. I still laugh at them. It's maybe my favorite show ever. If I had to, somebody put a gun to my head and said, what's your favorite TV show of all time? Honeymooners. Meant a lot to me growing up. I watched it with my parents. All three of us would laugh our asses off. My parents still love it. Every once in a while when I'm visiting my parents, we'll bust out The Honeymooners and watch it. And it's something that all three of us can sit and watch and know everything that's going to happen and still love it. Honeymooners, maybe the best sitcom of all time. Maybe the greatest sitcom of all time. So, Simpsons. There's a period of time. The Simpsons sucks now. I haven't watched a new episode of The Simpsons, seriously, in maybe 20 years. I've not sat down maybe once or twice or 3 or 4 times over those years, 20 years maybe, where I've actually sat down and watched it. It was appointment TV in the mid-90s. From about 92 to 98, there wasn't a better show on TV. Every single week, it was brilliant. It was funny. John Swartzwelder, who was leading the writing, nobody wrote better than him. And at that time, between 92, 98, it was the greatest TV show on television, and nothing came close. And it was a lot of great TV between 1992 and 98, but there wasn't a funnier or more brilliant show on TV than The Simpsons at that time. Now, not so good. Here's a show that I didn't discover until a few years ago. Everybody Loves Raymond. Now, when it was on during the popularity in the 90s and into the late 90s, early 2000s, I never watched it. I would watch it here and there. I didn't have anything against it. I thought Ray Romano was pretty funny. Still one of my favorite episodes of SNL ever is the episode that he hosted with that Sports Center bit. Come on, man. Where he's like the new anchor on Sports Center, trying to come up with new catchphrases. Sweet Sassy Molassy. Anyway, I never really got into it. I started watching it. I started watching it right before I got fired. It was during the pandemic, a little bit before the pandemic. Right around the time I started watching it. And it's fucking brilliant. Everybody Loves Raymond is fucking brilliant. Okay, I'm behind. I'm way behind. And this is a quintessential sitcom. It's about a family. It's wacky. You know the characters. Beat, joke, set up, joke, done in front of a studio audience with a laugh. But it's as good a sitcom as you'll ever see. I love Everybody Loves Raymond. I love everybody on it. The unsung hero on that show is Patricia Heaton. Everybody else on that show is great. Everybody's great. Everybody knows it. You love it. But Patricia Heaton is the key to why that show works. She's fucking brilliant on that show. It's brilliant comedic acting. And she's hot. But yeah, Everybody Loves Raymond. Way late to the game on that one. Way late to the game on that one. But I love Everybody Loves Raymond. All right, so Seinfeld. Another show that I never watched when it was on. I did not watch Seinfeld ever when it was on. Never. I'm not going to mention. Obviously, Friends is not on my list because I think Friends is a piece of shit, and I don't. I watched one full episode because I was stuck on a plane, and I've seen it here and there. I don't understand it. I don't get it. A lot of the other shows that are very popular, like Big Bang Theory, I've watched 2-3 minutes here and there. Fucking awful. Absolutely awful. And a lot of these sitcoms that are popular that other people really loved, I see here and there. I've watched minutes of it. 10 minutes here. 15 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes here. There's a lot of shit, including Big Bang Theory is one of the worst shows I've ever seen in my fucking life. And I can't stand Friends. Seinfeld is one of those shows that I just kind of fuck it, I'm not going to watch it. So I didn't watch it in the 90s when it was popular. I didn't start watching Seinfeld till a couple of years into its syndication. Started watching it on Channel 32 during the reruns. And now I've seen every episode of Seinfeld 80 million times. certain episodes I think are some of the greatest episodes of television ever. The opposite, where George does the absolute opposite of his instinct. One of the greatest episodes of television, not just sitcom, ever. And Seinfeld's brilliant. The last couple of seasons, when Larry David left, were terrible. And as the show went along, it wasn't as funny. But like season 2 through season 5 of that show, brilliant. It's like every episode, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3, episode 4 of this particular season, they just get better and better and better and better. Seinfeld's one of the greatest shows of all time, and a show that I could watch repeatedly. There are some shows that you can watch over and over and over and over and over and over again and never get sick of them, Honeymooners being one of them. Seinfeld, for me, is that way. So those are my favorite sitcoms of all time. Again, not counting the British stuff, because I think Fawlty Towers beats all of them, but those are the greatest sitcoms of all time, and the reason I bring it up is, for some unbelievable reason, 40 years have passed since the beginning of Police Squad, one of the greatest shows of all time. So, on the 40th anniversary of Police Squad, I just wanted to throw out a bunch of funny shows that I love that fall into the category of, half an hour sitcom. So, anyway, those are some of my favorites. Do you have favorites? What did I leave out? Fuck the Big Bang Theory. If you're going to include the Big Bang Theory, I'm going to include this. But other than that, Police Squad, 40 years old. If you've never seen the 6 episodes of Police Squad, I don't know what's wrong with you, but you need to get the 6 episodes of Police Squad. Turn this off right now and watch them. And that's it. So, happy 40th anniversary to Police Squad. It's funny.